This, of course, South Carolina player, a Dawn Staley minion, just 2 weeks ago, went on I Am Athlete on a podcast, called Caitlin Clark fans racist in front of everybody. And it's amazing. There's a subsection of fans out there that are willing to eat crap from the WNBA.
2 weeks ago, Raven Johnson sat down for a podcast interview and made a sweeping public statement that Caitlin Clark fans are racist, not a portion of the fan base, not an extreme fringe that every large community unfortunately contains. The entire fan base painted with that brush on a public platform with zero qualification attached to it. Fast forward to Monday night, and the Indiana Fever walked to the podium and used their first-round draft pick to select her. The same organization that built a sold-out arena on the financial and cultural foundation provided by those exact fans just handed a roster spot to someone who publicly insulted every single one of them 2 weeks earlier. The backlash was immediate, it was severe, and it is showing absolutely no signs of cooling down. Welcome back to Hoopzonic, where we cover the stories that matter most to the people who actually watch this league and buy these tickets.
And never mind the logistical issues that the draft pick causes. The Indiana Fever went on a rampage yesterday on social media, on their Twitter X, trying to get you fired up for Raven Johnson. And then they made the mistake of asking you to buy tickets.
Here is where the situation becomes genuinely complicated. Beyond the surface level controversy of the pick itself, the Fever did not make this decision in a vacuum or at a moment when the relationship between the organization and its fan base was operating from a position of complete trust and goodwill. Stephanie White spent last season consistently positioning Caitlin Clark off ball and limiting her to spot up shooting opportunities while other players ran the primary offense. The exact style of play that made Clark the most watched and most commercially impactful player in the entire history of women's basketball got systematically shelved in favor of a system that produced mediocre results and left millions of fans watching in visible frustration throughout the season. The fan base tolerated that frustration because they maintained a fundamental belief that the people running this organization understood the value of what they possessed and were making decisions in good faith toward maximizing it. Monday night's draft pick fractured that belief in a way that is going to take considerably more than a press conference to repair.
They went on social media asking for you to buy tickets as a consumer of their product. Ooh. The backlash? Oh. It is. There's two of these, by the way. There's another one. Well, what are you waiting for? Come and join the show. Additional single game tickets available.
Look carefully at the promotional image the Indiana Fever posted following the draft. Caitlin Clark, the most marketable athlete in women's professional sports. The singular reason attendance at this franchise tripled. The player, whose presence transformed a struggling organization into a national conversation, is positioned on the edge of the frame, partially obscured. More of Aaliyah Boston is visible in that image than the player who single-handedly redirected the financial trajectory of this entire franchise. That is not a random oversight by someone in the graphics department working quickly on draft night. That is a compositional decision that communicates something about how the organizational hierarchy is understood internally, and the fan base read that communication immediately and without any ambiguity. The ticket sales post went up Tuesday afternoon with the message asking fans what they were waiting for and announcing additional single game tickets available. The replies arrived fast and in volume. They were not fans rushing excitedly toward a purchase. They were paying customers expressing exactly how they felt about the direction they were watching this organization move.
And do I expect these games eventually will sell out? Sure, I guess. But the automatic fired upness that this kind of a tweet, and by the way, look at this. This is the biggest player in women's sports, the most popular player in women's sports. They got her sidelined over here.
That response from the fan base captures the actual stakes of this situation more accurately than any internal organizational memo ever could. Fever fans did not discover Caitlin Clark through traditional WNBA marketing pipelines. They watched her at Iowa running one of the most genuinely entertaining offensive systems in the history of college basketball. Fast-paced, high-scoring, logo-range three-pointers, no-look passes delivered from angles that made defenders look unprepared. That specific brand of basketball attracted millions of viewers to women's basketball who had never previously considered watching a WNBA game. It created an audience that was culturally new to the sport and had no pre-existing loyalty to the league's traditional style of play. The grinded-out half-court system that defined much of last season is not what sold those tickets and filled those seats. It was never going to be what retained those fans across multiple seasons. If the Fever continue moving in a direction that marginalizes Clark's strengths, misuses her skills, and now drafts players who publicly insulted the fan base built around her, those fans have communicated with absolute clarity that they are not committed to staying through year 3 of an organization that appears to not fully understand what it has.
This is not the franchise for her. This wasn't the coach for her. They hired. This is about to be the biggest misstep maybe in sports history. The fumbling of the back. This may be Babe Ruth all over again. Boston was cursed for many a year.
The Boston Red Sox sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees in 1919 and spent the next 86 years chasing a championship they never won. That curse became one of the defining cautionary tales in the entire history of professional sports, and it followed that franchise for nearly a century. What the Indiana Fever appears to be doing in real time has the structural characteristics of a modern version of that same catastrophic miscalculation, because if Caitlin Clark eventually reaches the conclusion that this organization is not the right situation for her long-term development and her competitive ambitions, if she explores her options when her contract permits that exploration, the Fever will have allowed the most valuable asset in women's professional sports history to walk away from a situation they created through a series of decisions that were entirely within their control to make differently. And unlike the Ruth transaction, which at minimum delivered the Red Sox cash resources they genuinely needed at the time, this draft pick delivers an organization a player who alienated their core-paying audience before ever practicing in their facility or wearing their uniform in a game that counts.
If you play Caitlin at 2, you're doing her wrong. Then you brought in a person who lied about the Fever and trashing Caitlin Clark. Now we have to support someone who hates us based on skin color. I hope Caitlin Clark leaves. You don't deserve her. Wow, having Fever rage bait fatigue I'll watch on TV is fine. Wow. I'm not spending my money on airfare, hotel, and tickets to watch Caitlin Clark play off the ball.
The comments have not stopped coming, and the people leaving them are not anonymous internet accounts with no skin in the game. Fans who traveled from Georgia to Indianapolis last season to watch games in person are saying publicly they will redirect that energy and that money toward Atlanta Dream games instead. Season ticket holders are openly reconsidering whether their renewals make financial sense given the direction they are watching unfold. People who were prepared to purchase WNBA League Pass are posting that the $40 serves them better as gas money. This is not a social media cycle that burns hot for 24 hours and disappears. These are paying customers with documented purchasing history informing an organization directly and specifically that they have lost confidence in the people making decisions. And the timing makes everything considerably worse because the Fever had genuine positive momentum heading into draft night. Sophie Cunningham's return energized the fan base in a real and measurable way. The Mitchell signing created legitimate championship optimism. Fans who had been frustrated throughout last season were actively preparing to reinvest their enthusiasm and their dollars into another season. The Raven Johnson selection did not simply pause that momentum, it reversed it completely and sent it in the opposite direction overnight.
Scouting and draft pieces for this team. I was on a high when y'all signed Sophie, and I was just about to buy a ticket and renew League Pass until yesterday. I'm out. I'm not paying these ticket prices.
Here is what the Indiana Fever front office needs to genuinely understand about the situation they have created for themselves. Professional sports organizations operate on a foundational principle that supersedes every tactical and analytical consideration that gets discussed in draft rooms and front office meetings. You do not insult your paying customers. You do not use a first-round draft pick on a player who publicly called your entire fan base racist 14 days before you selected her. You do not position your franchise player on the periphery of promotional materials while the organization she built is selling tickets on the strength of her name and her image. You do not ask people to spend money on seats while simultaneously signaling through your decisions that their concerns and their reactions carry no weight in your process. Johnson sat down for a post-draft interview and walked back the statements she made on that podcast. Certain fans want to accept that retraction at face value and allow the situation to move forward without further friction, but the honest assessment of that cleanup interview requires acknowledging one uncomfortable reality. She is now a professional athlete under contract with the Indiana Fever, and she is professionally obligated to say the correct things in that context. What deserves weight is not what she says now with a contract in hand and a uniform waiting in her locker. What deserves weight is what she said when she believed there were no professional consequences attached to saying it. That podcast interview communicated her actual position. The post-draft interview communicates her media training. The front office had genuine alternatives available to them on that draft board. They could have addressed documented positional needs without manufacturing this controversy simultaneously. They could have selected any number of players who had not spent the preceding month generating negative press specifically connected to the fan base this organization depends on financially. They chose this outcome instead. They chose to communicate to their fans that basketball evaluation exists in a separate universe from the relationship between the organization and the people whose ticket purchases and merchandise spending fund the operation. Hoopsonic will be watching how this situation develops as training camp approaches and the full roster begins operating together. Drop your honest reaction below. Did the Fever make a catastrophic mistake, or is this a situation that resolves itself once the season actually starts?